Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC College Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host that you hear on Mondays, Ethan Orfe, back at it once again, bringing you all the college news that you want to hear, and sometimes the college news that you would rather not want to hear. But that's what we do here at the GSMC. We try to paint both sides of this crazy college football season that we don't know how it's going to work out. And one of the main reasons why we don't know why it's going to work out is because we are in the middle of a pandemic that is affecting not only the United States, but also everywhere else across this planet. And it seems to me that everybody is agitated. Everything sucks, essentially, when it comes to this college football thing. Like, everything sucks. Both sides have points, right? We don't know what will be the correct way to handle things. However, what we do know is everything sucks, and we got to just take everything that we get on the chin. And I don't blame any Power 5 conferences or any conference really if they want to continue to try and have a season. And I don't blame college football, people who don't want to play, people who have canceled or postponed their seasons to the spring or just canceled them indefinitely. I don't blame them either, because you don't know. Nobody knows anything. What I do know is college football players are looking at their schoolmates, people who are not playing college football, in a different light, for sure. So OSU safety Trey Sterling sent out a tweet speaking on Stillwater's crowded bars during the pandemic. He says, "Yep, I've decided I'm not going to class on Monday." So it's very telling, as Stillwater's bars have been packed with lines out the door despite the pandemic, and footage around the internet have been going around to see what it looks like inside the bars, and many OSU players have retracted or have redacted to this, reacted to this, including players like Trey Sterling, players like Colin Clay and Kenyon Williams have all kind of had their own personal sentiments about this whole thing. And at the bottom line, this is what everybody was speaking on, right? Is this what we really wanted to see, right? Is this what people thought was going to happen? And some people thought that it wouldn't happen like this. And this is what I was worried about personally, because I said at the very beginning of all of this, right? There's two sides to this whole thing when it comes to playing sports this year in the fall. And it's a professional side, and there's the collegiate side. The professional side, you can see the avenue on how they're going to get players to commit to this season and play through and do as best as they can during safety precautions for COVID-19 and figure out a way to get the season started, right? I would have to admit, I did not know how well the NBA was going to do. The NBA has done a fantastic job in light of coronavirus. And it is so shocking how much, personally, I missed having a sport to watch and care about than anything else going on around in the world right now. The NBA has been a godsend for multiple sports fans, even some who are not big into the NBA, but the fact that it's on and people are watching it again has been a godsend. And it's not just because they're back. It's because they're back and the product feels as close as it can to regular basketball as it can be inside Orlando in the bubble. When we go to the MLB, it feels different, right? It's not the same. Maybe we just underestimated how much fans actually matter to this style of, or to this game. And baseball in of itself is a slow game. It is very methodical on its approach. And a lot of things can happen in a baseball game that you don't even really pay attention to because everything takes like a minute before you really get going. And there's not a lot of movement, not a lot of action. So fan interactions, it adds to the stakes. It adds to the stress. It adds to the excitability. When somebody hasn't hit in 4 tries and they get to that 5th at bat when the game is tied 0-0 and they're at the bottom of the 10th or something like that, and they jump on a first pitch and it goes out yard, fans erupt because just like that player is just waiting to get something good, waiting for something good to happen, so are the fans. And the fans are very important to that environment in baseball that I feel they're missing sorely right now, amongst other things that are happening. But they're trying. And for the most part, they've gotten back on track as far as keeping numbers low for coronavirus and keeping teams and players in check. College football is a totally different animal because you're not just dealing with professionals. You're not dealing with professionals at all. You're dealing with basically amateurs. And as much as the amateurs want to play, and some are committed to playing this year, they really want to. We see different things from people signing petitions to people arguing that we should still be able to play and that the players are really trying to push to play. We see Joe Burrow, someone who doesn't even have to deal with this, arguing that if he didn't play last season, who knows if he even gets drafted, that this season could matter so much to different individuals. And he has a point. Like, players want to play. It's not like the players are out here saying they don't want to play. Not a lot of them. Like, there's a large majority of people who say that they want to try and play this season. The problem is there's so many different factors involved in college football for you to have a successful season. One, the environment of college in of itself is filled with young people that make dumb decisions. That's just factual. I'm a young person. I was in college once. I know that every decision I made in college wasn't always the best at the time, but that's what young people do. Young people make mistakes. Young people make dumb decisions. It's how they grow, and it's how you make your life better because of it. You have to be allowed to make those dumb decisions. Now, problem is, in the middle of a pandemic where everybody is basically selfish, everybody looks at it as, well, if it hasn't affected me, then maybe I don't need to worry about it too much and not caring about the grand scheme of things. And yet, everybody wants their cake and eat it too. People want college football, but people aren't acting like they want to go watch college football. People wanted sports in April, May, but we opened the country too fast, should I say. And we didn't follow through properly to where sports had to take a longer time. And they're still not sure if we're going to get fall sports this year because of it. Everything has a consequence. And unfortunately, one of the big consequences of not following through health guidelines is not being able to have fall sports potentially. And a lot of players are upset because they're seeing people that go to their campus, people who are registered as students, basically participating in stuff that they would last year without a coronavirus going on. And it is basically hindering everybody's opportunity to be able to play fall sports. And that in of itself is already going to cause a rift because players are going to point to stuff like this and saying, do universities even really want to play? Because a lot of people are saying that the media is out here destroying college football, college sports, fall sports. I don't believe that's true 100% because if people really wanted fall sports, college football to be here right now for real, none of this would be happening. If fall sports was the bottom line of getting it done no matter what, we wouldn't see different businesses being able to do this. There would be some other way. They would find a way because at the end of the day, college football is the breadwinner in a lot of different places around the country. And of course, it's going to be hard to sit here and say, well, a business shouldn't be able to operate because we want to be able to operate our own business. That's not how that works. But at the same time, I'd have to assume that they understand the circumstances that they are in when you allow college students back into the campus and you're not being strict about how they handle themselves outside of the campus lifestyle. Because you can ask for masks to be worn all day. You can ask for classes to be set up to where they only go maybe once every 2 weeks to a physical class. You can do a lot of different things. You can prep your classes to be mainly online. You can do so much, but only so much, to the point to where you can control things on your campus. But once it leaves the campus, once you go off campus, once you start having people go to different bars and clubs, like we see in Athens close by me, right? People in Athens can go out till a curfew, 11:30 if I'm remembering correctly. After 11:30 p.m., everything gets shut down. That's probably the strongest stipulation I've seen so far in a big major city for a Power 5 school in direct response of coronavirus that could potentially help their college football season that I've seen so far. That alone is very, it's powerful. But at the same time, bars are only one part of the issue. Kids don't have to go to bars in order to have congregated fun, so to speak, have parties, have a large majority of people in one small specific area. There are kickbacks, there's house parties, there's so many different things that you cannot technically regulate unless you get, law enforcement involved and saying that there is a whole curfew around the entire city, the entire area. And even then, you only have so many people. And we've seen, like, a lot of places have curfews anyway, and there's parties. As long as they're not reported on, it's a firestorm, and it's not going to be pretty. And now you're seeing college athletes, different people from media, or even, coaches maybe, have looked at this and said, this feels like a slap in the face, because we are fighting tooth and nail to be able to play. And already we feel like we're behind the 8 ball, as in players and coaches. Like, they are behind the 8 ball as far as getting their conferences to either change their mind and start a season, or continue to keep the push to start the season because of numbers still rising, because people are still going to do what they want to do when it doesn't affect them directly. And unfortunately, that involves people in college sports. And not only that, college football players who may still want to who still may end up playing anyway, right? So there's still conferences that are still planning to have a season. They could be compromised by classmates, people who do not play any sport, who have just been going out because it's the first week of classes, people are having fun, and they want to go out and enjoy themselves, even though we're in the midst of a pandemic that can basically ruin a lot of different people's futures. And because people just think about, the recovery rate's this high or whatever, we don't think about, one, that we're trying to reduce the spread, and it's not always about how you recover. And two, just because you recover from COVID-19 doesn't necessarily mean that you won't have life-altering effects from getting it. So those two major factors are always being left out of the equation out of a lot of people's minds when they decide to go out with no mask, when they decide to go out in large group settings that can't be maintained or can't be properly socially distanced and things of that nature. So football players can get easily compromised by this, right? All it takes is just one time. All it takes is just a few people in a class, and things can get bad really fast. We're already seeing effects of how we're going to see it, right? We're going to see how people deal with this virus in a college setting. And when we're already seeing how universities, different institutions are dealing with the idea of having to shut down early than anticipated, they're already planning on sending students home before they would normally do it, right? Thanksgiving is typically where a lot of campuses are going to shut everything down. We're going to move students out, and they're going to go home and finish the rest of the semester via online. A lot of universities have found a way to make their classes viable if they need to go fully online. Because at this point, it is no longer just an if an outbreak occurs at this point. Because if they were smart, which I think most people who manage universities are, they're very intelligent. They know that this is no longer an if statement anymore. This is when a when statement happens. This is when an outbreak occurs. How are we going to deal with this? When the coronavirus gets too out of hand, when are we going to deal with this? For the further example, before we go to break, Athens only has one major hospital, and it actually is the only major hospital around the surrounding counties around Athens. So just imagine you bring in a surplus of students in, coronavirus outbreaks happen, and that hospital has to deal with so many more people that they can't even comprehend. It's going to have issues. And there's a lot of different places like this where when we don't have enough medical staff, enough beds, enough people to be able to take care of individuals, that's when the coronavirus is at its worst. And that's what we've been trying to avoid this whole time. And right now, we are in the midst of seeing what is going to happen because we are not doing the proper things. And athletes are getting frustrated. Coaches are getting frustrated. Fans of the sport are getting frustrated. And I'm personally frustrated as well. But we're going to take our first break. And when we come back, we are going to be talking about rankings and what is to come in the future for college football.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
We're back here at the GSMC College Football Podcast, and we just left off talking about different athletes across the NCAA landscape have been voicing their opinions on why they feel slighted when they see a bunch of their fellow classmates going out and seeing a lot of non-socially distanced events happening around their universities and around their areas that is making them feel a certain type of way about people complaining that college football is not coming back, and you see what's happening around them. So, once again, the players may want to try everything in their power to make college football happen, but unfortunately, that can't always be enough, and it's going to take a full-on effort from everybody involved, and that's also including, of course, people who don't play college football. But we're going to step away from the collegiate side of football, and we're going to be looking at some people who might end up coming around the corner in 2021. So there's been a lot of data compiled over the last 7 months, and SI All-American has brought to us another top 10 list, and this time it is pass rushers. So the defensive edge prospects offer one of the more unique skill sets across any position. Among the 14 All-Americans will rank in the 2021 class, and these are premier pass rushers with length, bend, and that innate ability to put pressure on the passer from the edge in a variety of ways. So here's the best of the best, and we are going to start with JT Tumuluau, I believe that's how you pronounce it, from Semage, Washington, from Eastside Catholic High School. He's 6'5", 280 pounds. He's considering Washington, Ohio State, Alabama, USC, and Stanford, among others. So JT is not only the top edge prospect on the board, he's in the mix for a top overall prospect in the class. So the Washington native is a player that they've been aware of since before high school, and even then there was talk that he was already the best of the 2021 class. JT can work as a buck on the edges as his size, strength, and athleticism allow him to be effective both standing up and with his hand down, so he can be in the 2-point stance or in a 3-point stance, and he can convert speed to power with ease as a pass rusher, as well as projection to defensive tackle, as well as being able to set the edge, anchor, and shield blocks in the run game. And his size does warrant an interior projection to defensive tackle. And that is something that you can foresee in his college career. And we begin JT as an edge prospect since he's shown versatility to play as an on-ball Sam, Buck, or Jack, 5 technique end, and in a 3-man front, and as a 7-9 technique rush end in a 4-man front. So he is very versatile. He can move in and out of the front 4. He can be in a 3-4. He can be in a 4-3. He can play on the edge. He can play on the inside. He is definitely somebody that we need to take into account. Definitely going to be one of those major 5 stars that teams are looking to get. Number 2, Jack Sawyer from Pinkerton, Ohio, and from North Pinkerton High School. He's 6'5", 230, committed to Ohio State. So perhaps the most polished pass rusher on the list, Sawyer is among the top overall prospects in the country. So Ohio State pledge spends some time standing up, but at his best from a 4-point stance with both hands down. Sawyer has an ideal snap quickness as well as long arms and active mitts. He possesses a varied pass rush toolbox, and it consists of classic speed rush that he pairs with good bend and front shoulder dip at entry points, a spin, a stutter and go, and power to speed, among others. So Sawyer also plays with a motor that is noticeable on tape and showing speed and effort when pursuing backside runs and hunting ball carriers. He works to keep his outside arm free when he's playing side or he's in the play side edge in the run game, and he takes proper angles with movement skills that translate from his basketball background. So we strongly feel he has alpha rusher traits and fits well with wide alignment and in a 4-man front. It would be surprising if Sawyer saw himself earn a role as a sub-package pass rusher very early in his career in Columbus. Number 3 is Dominion Robinson from Gaithersburg, and he goes to Quince Orchard High School. So he's committed to Maryland, and he's 6'4", 220, and there aren't many pass rusher prospects in this class who are as active and disruptive as Robinson. So he's a talent who could begin to change the trajectory of Maryland's program, both on the recruiting trail and on the field. So in a similar fashion, Sean Cody did for Pete Carroll in the USC earlier this century in the year 2000, Robinson has excellent length on the hoof, which allows him to keep offensive tackles away from his breastplate. He also possesses ideal snap quickness to jump on top of blockers and quickness with his mitts. The future Terp can bend corner and flat out, or he can bend the corner and come out flat to passers as well, and as well as hunt with speed to chase runners in long pursuit. So whether it's standing up or with his hand down, it would not be surprising to see Robinson on the field as a sub-package pass rusher as a freshman. And just to remind you guys, sub-package means that you come in some of the times, and that's really huge for a young person's development in college football, because it's really, really, really tough to be an every down pass rusher, because it's really rare. Like, it doesn't happen much often anymore. And being able to be a sub-package guy means that you're going to get crucial play time when they need you to be out there, and it gives you experience and it helps with your growth if you're out there. So there's not that many players in the NFL, period, that are out there every down or majority of their snaps defensively. There's only a few. So sub-package is a good start for a lot of players. Number 4, Dylan Brooks from Alabama and Handley High School. So he's committed to Tennessee, 6'5", 250. So Brooks is another player that is high on both edge board and overall board. He combines ideal length with solid activity with his hands, including a chop and a powerful long arm stab. After he routinely reduces ground quickly on blockers, the long frame Brooks shows enough ability to bend at entry points before using a long stride to close and finish. With his length, Brooks can be a nightmare for passers trying to manipulate throwing lanes, and his arms and his hands present difficult obstacles. The future Tennessee Vol also can be productive in the run game, showcasing solid scheme read traits and mental processing, plus quick shed ability versus tight ends and running backs. Tennessee head coach Jeremy Pruitt is defensive-minded at heart, and Brooks has a skill set to be a cornerstone defender on the edges in Knoxville. Number 5 is Keyshawn Silver from Rock Mount, North Carolina, in Rocky Mount Senior High School. So he's 6'5", 255, committed to North Carolina. And the first thing that jumps out about Silver is his frame, as he has the size of a prospect who could kick inside of some point in his college career. So he could be somebody who's a bigger defensive tackle kind of area. And with his frame, the North Carolina pledge has experience playing inside as a 1 technique, as well as some 4-eye, 5 technique, and 7 technique on both the left and right edges. Silver can alter speed to power a bull rush, a quick chop, and a 2-hand swipe among his pass rush toolkit. And he's also alert and aware to get his hands up to disrupt throwing lanes. Aside from his effectiveness crashing into passers, Silver's size allows him to set edges, and he's tough at the point. The future Tar Heel can come to balance in space before quickly closing and finishing, and we could feel him surely blossom there in Chapel Hill, being for North Carolina. Number 6 is Elijah Judy from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, from Northeast High School, from also 6'3". So he's a bigger guy, 6'3", 240, committed to Georgia. So Judy's tape is among the most fun to watch in his class. He spent most of his junior season dealing with a hand and wrist injury, thus a cast and club was on him. However, his snap quickness was still evident. Judy routinely jumps on offensive tackles at the snap, forcing them to open their hips and creating an easy entry point for him as he simultaneously achieves a good bend and dip to corner the passers. Judy features a classic speed rush that he can convert to power when he needs to, as well as a spin, 2-hand swipe, and a rip, which is his prominent counter versus blockers. He appears to be adding mass to his frame, which should allow him to hold up well on the edge in the run game. The more we study Judy on tape, the more obvious it appears that he has the skill set of a jack in a head coach Kirby Smart's defensive scheme. Number 7 is Jeremiah Williams from Birmingham, Alabama, from Ramsey High School. 6'4", 220, and considering Auburn, Florida, LSU, Oklahoma, and others. So the more compact edge prospect compared to others on this list, Williams may have the best range within the top 10. Not only can he pressure the passer with a low center of gravity and his first step that leaves tackles with less time to combat his speed rush, he can also work just as well off the ball as a true second-level player. From there, the Birmingham native can affect the offense in coverage as a downhill talent or as a blitzer, showcasing great anticipation and instincts on his path to the backfield. Armed with a strong punch and great hands overall, the lack of elite strength is compensated by the understanding of how to beat blockers in the phone booth while subtle quickness and mature pass rush plan. Williams, who can win with an inside long arm stab, inside chop and club, rip and swim in addition to speed rush, fits best as a Jack or Sam edge rush type on the flanks in a defensive with a 3-4 base. So he's going to be a guy that's really going to be powerful on the outside for somebody's offense or somebody's defensive scheme. It's going to be really fun to watch. Number 8 is Quentin Somerville from Scottsdale, Arizona, and he's 6'3", 230, committed to Michigan. So the future Wolverine is set first level threat with pass rushing traits strictly off the edge or even inside on occasion. Great hand technique combines with pound-for-pound strength and flash quickness and finishing power to affect offensive tackles and guards alike. Regardless, once competing in the Big Ten, a role in which he's already pretty familiar with, a polished pass rushing toolbox pairs well with his hands and borderline elite first step quickness, whereas moves like a long arm stab, slap and club, and arm over and rip bridge the gaps between blocker and passer. So just as consistent versus the run as a true edge setter with strong hands and leverage while working in contain. Somerville averaged the true 3-down skill set sooner rather than later when he arrives in Ann Arbor. Number 9 is Dallas Turner from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, from St. Thomas Aquinas. I believe that's Aquinas. Yeah. 6'3", 225, committed to Alabama. So he's a Crimson Tide commit, pursues the passer with some of the best bend in the class of 2021. Turner can scream off the snap of a football and he provides flexibility, and he's not yet polished. And at the point of contact against offensive tackles looking to contain his explosiveness. So the speed to power conversion rate is on a higher end of the spectrum, and his level of intensity is in between the white lines, mirrors the natural ability to any defensive coordinator's liking. Turner has the athleticism to stand up or compete in underneath coverages responsibly, but he's most comfortable as a classic hand-in-the-dirt pass rush prospect who can challenge the edge with speed and consistent long-arm stab moves. So flashing counters like spin and hesitation moves, adding polish to Turner's pass rush plan will only accelerate his timeline for impact once he's in Tuscaloosa for good. Number 10, finally on this list, is Zaire Patterson from Winston-Salem, North Carolina Preparatory Academy. 6'6", 230, committed to Clemson, and perhaps the most raw prospect on the list given his lack of Friday night football experience compared to his peers and contemporaries. There's still too much flash to ignore Patterson's game. The extremely long and lean athlete who has basketball background. He's head turning, first step off the edge in his size, and he already shows comfort coming off the ball as a stand-up defender. There are hints of speed to power conversion, and even strong bend at 6'6". So he's a guy who can be nimble and light on his feet even at 6'6". Granted, he played basketball, so that might have helped. And he's also shown great awareness despite the inexperience of playing. Redirecting based on the play flow and playing the passing lanes with an elite wingspan, even collateralizing a pick six down the line in 2019, Patterson has room to add to his pass rushing toolbox as much as he does physically with his frame, but truly sits among the most twitchy edge rushers in the class of 2021 with that rare bend of elite traits to continue the pass rushing production in Death Valley. So there you have it. Those are your top 10 pass rushers coming in 2021 possibly, and it's going to be exciting to see. But we're going to take another break and come back talking about more college football rankings, the new top 25 here at the GSMC.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, welcome back, GSMC College Football Nation. And if you are a fan of the Pac-12 and of the Big Ten, apologies ahead of time. It's going to be a sad time, and we're going to be okay. You're going to be okay, but as we know, they're not going to be continuing with the fall football season, and they're looking forward to spring, as that might be something that might come down later on the pipeline. But we do have to cover the new top 25 preseason rankings because it is the only thing we have to look forward to as of yet, as we don't know what's going to occur beyond that. And like I said, they won't have any Big Ten or Pac-12 players or teams on this top 25 due to COVID-19 concerns. And it's been 9 teams that have lost from its preseason top 25 looking ahead of the fall. And hopefully without any injuries, transfers, or player opt-outs, even the preseason top 25 needs a rework a month out of the season. And a lot of people voted on this. and we're going to see what it's all about. So number 25 is SMU, the Mustangs, and their offense is all about their senior quarterback, Shane Buechele, who threw for 3,929 yards and 34 touchdowns last season in his first campaign after transferring from Texas. So he'll have some playmakers as well. James Porsche might be off to the NFL, but Reggie Robinson, who had 803 yards, 6 touchdowns in just 8 games, is a true number one target, and he'll be flanked by a deep group of pass catchers, including tight end Keelan Granson, who had 721 yards and 9 touchdowns, and sophomore receiver Rashee Rice with 403 yards last year. So questions arise here as they did a season ago on defense. The Mustangs finished 78th nationally in games allowed per play, which is all right. It's not the best. It's okay. But SMU allowed 40.5 points per game over the final 6 games as injuries stacked up. Getting back Richard Moore, the team's leading tackler in 2018, will help after he played in just 3 games last season due to an injury. Adding Stanford graduate transfer defensive tackle Mike Williams will provide a boost as well for a unit that already brought back 6 starters. And we'll know a lot more about the Mustangs quickly as they'll play TCU early in the season on September 12th. Number 24 is Pittsburgh, the Panthers. So before star defensive lineman Jalen Tyman, who had 10.5 sacks, opted out, the Pittsburgh had an argument to be in the nation's top overall defensive line. Losing Twyman it hurts, right? But the group promises to still be a strength with Patrick Jones and the return of Rashad Weaver as well. So with standout Paris Ford anchoring the back end, the Panthers defense that finished 4th nationally in yards allowed per play last year will again be elite. Offense, as always, seems to be for Pat Narduzzi teams is in the question. Pittsburgh took a major step back in year 1 under offensive coordinator Mike Whipple, dropping from 59th to 106th in yards per play, and that's largely because of the rushing attack was 13th in 2018, fell off a cliff to 118th nationally. Pittsburgh is hoping freshman running back Israel Abanikanda, who is number 161st in 2020 as far as rankings go for running backs, and he can provide some instant offense. Realistically, the senior quarterback Kenny Pickett, who will determine the offense's ceiling. His bowl game performance was 27 for 39, 361 yards, 3 touchdowns, provided Pittsburgh a lot of hope entering the offseason, and the reworked ACC schedule isn't doing Pittsburgh any favors, however. Number 23 is the Baylor Bears, of course. There are plenty of change in Waco, with Dan Arnada taking over for Matt Rule, who's headed to the NFL following a 10-win season. But one thing remained consistent over the last few years, and that's quarterback Charlie Brewer. So set to break a bevy of Bears all-time records in passing, the 4-year starter has Brewer and the rest of Baylor's offense that returns 7 starters should play per game, should see a jump in production for 2020 thanks to the scheme fit. The unit ranked 75th nationally in plays per game last season, and Brewer expects the new offense, which will combine Larry Fedora's spread with what LSU employed last season, to pick up the tempo. Arnada said that I think the new offense will allow us to play fast and at my best when he's able to do that. Arnada has a long time been considered among the foremost defensive minds in college football, but has a tough time and a tough task ahead with a group that brings back just 32% of its production coming off a year. The Bears allowed just 4.9 yards per play, which was 20th nationally. Watch for players like cornerback Kaylon Barnes and graduate transfer edge rusher William Bradley King to emerge as the new look defense's centerpieces, along with linebacker Terrell Bernard. Number 22 is Kentucky Wildcats. So the Wildcats returned the 25th most production in the country. Sometimes people may forget that quarterback Tyree Wilson, a key piece in Kentucky's 10-win effort in 2018, missed most of last season due to injury. And the Wildcats still managed to win 8 games with a wide receiver turned quarterback Lynn Bowden, basically playing a full-time, Wildcat role. So Wilson has many of the athletic elements that made Bowden so dynamic, and he'll bring the passing element back to the offense that showed a ton of creativity last season under Eddie Gran and Darren Henshaw's direction. It helps that Kentucky's O-line is one of the better units in the nation, and as for defense, the Wildcats returned 7 starters off the unit that finished the top 40 the last 2 years. Standout edge rusher Jamar Watson is back for his senior campaign along a group that has been stingy for years. Mark Stoops has emerged as one of the nation's most underrated coaches, and this team fits his profile. Quietly very good and underrated entering the season. Number 21 is the Miami Hurricanes. So Miami co-founded fans and analysts alike last year with a 6-7 record. That run includes losses to FIU and Louisiana Tech and wins over Virginia and Louisville. Still, the Hurricanes finished the regular season 26th nationally in S&P. They've had a profile of a top 25 team, especially on defense, ranking 12th nationally in yards allowed per play. And most of that defense is back, even if star pass rusher Gregory Rizua isn't and should again be at a strength, right? Their defense should be good. The Hurricanes' ceiling will be determined by quarterback De'Aaron King, the transfer and Houston graduate, is among the most dynamic passers in college football when healthy and could transform Miami's offensive fortunes. Head coach Manny Diaz is counting on King and the new offensive coordinator Rhett Lashley to transform an attack that finished within the top 58 nationally in points per game since 2017. The skill talent has always been there to be utilized in Coral Gables, but Diaz is banking on his tenure that King can unlock it. Number 20 is TCU, the Horned Frogs. So strength is there, as it always seems to be with Gary Patterson coach teams, is the defense. 7 starters returned off the unit that finished 36th nationally in yards allowed per play, and leading the defense are safeties Trevon Mulrig and Ardarius Washington, who from the nation's best overall safety tandem. The secondary as a whole projects as a strength, and the front 7 is paced by star linebacker Garrett Wallow. The offense, despite the departure of Jalen Reagor, has plenty of skilled talent to play around. Freshman running back Zach Evans could be an immediate star, and wide receiver Talvaliance Hunt is ready to do his best Reagor impression. But sophomore quarterback Max Duggan, who will determine if TCU can contend or not, and we need to see more from him, of course. So to call Dugan's true freshman season uneven might be too kind. He had some legitimate moments of brilliance, and he struggled with consistently completing just 53% of his passes. Patterson is counting on reuniting offensive coordinator Sonny Crumby with Doug Meacham, who comes over from Kansas to spark the offense. That pair helped bring the spread to Fort Worth last decade, resulting in the Horned Frogs' 2014 playoff push. Number 19 is Virginia Tech. So the Hokies are coming off a 8-5 season and returned 17 starters from a unit that made drastic strides last season after a disastrous September. Though the overall talent level of the roster took a huge hit when star cornerback Caleb Farley opted out of the 2020 season, still things could improve in a year for Justin Flooney in Blacksburg. Hendon Hooker took a step in year 2 as a starter is a must. Hooker was efficient last year, 13 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but the Hokies need him to continue that with increased responsibility. The defense should be good, Bud Foster or not, and almost the entire unit is back and elevated. DC Justin Hamilton gives a top 40 defense some continuity. The Hokies secondary could be among the best in the country even without Farley. Number 18 is Iowa State Cyclones, and there's nothing more important in college football than a quarterback play. And the Cyclones claim to have the nation's best signal callers in Brock Purdy if it weren't for Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. Prudy would enter 2020 with the hype of the nation's top overall junior passer. Prudy sets 18 Iowa State records last season, passing for 3,983 yards and 27 touchdowns. Tight end Charlie Kohler and running back Breece Hall are among the best at their positions in the Big 12, and the offensive line is expected to be okay despite a trio of starters departing. Defenses where the Cyclones have shined throughout Matt Campbell's tenure. John Heacock's ever-adapting scheme has been studied by college programs and NFL teams looking for an edge in defending the spread. With 8 starters back, including the return of two-time first-team all Big 12 selection Greg Eisworth, the defense again projects to be a strength. Number 17 is the Cardinals from Louisville. Few teams are going to score more than Louisville this season, and the Cardinals quarterback, running back, wide receiver trio of Mikael Cunningham, Javon Hawkins, and Tutu Atwell is among the best in the country. Atwell particularly is a dynamic big play threat. He had the second most running or receiving plays of 60-plus yards of anyone in the country last season, and that happens when 4.29 speed is put in position to make plays. The defense, which finished 110th nationally in yards per allowed per play, needs some work, but the unit should improve with 8 starters back. Scott Satterfield is among the top overall coaches nationally and expect this team to make some noise in the ACC. Number 16 is the Memphis Tigers. So snubbed the first time around in the top 25, the Tigers debut higher in any new addition. Memphis is one of the more experienced teams in the AAC, led by 6-year senior quarterback Brady White. The offense promises to remain explosive. Even with Mike Norvell moving on to Florida State, Memphis finished 9th nationally in yards allowed per play, and the engine of that unit, running back Kenny Gainwell, is back to lead the way. Wide receiver DeMonte Coxey will also be AAC's top returning receiver. Defensively, the conference's top pro football focused linebacker Xavier Cullen returns to an anchor in a unit that brings back 77% of his production. There's generally an assumption a program will take a step back when a coach like Norvell exits, but Ryan Silverfield, formerly the associate head coach, brings continuity amid the transition, and that matters. This team still has the bones of a group that beat Cincinnati twice in a row last season to capture the American crown. Number 15 is Tennessee. So there's a decent chance Tennessee is a team we overhype greatly thanks to late season push. Still, it's hard to ignore a 6-game win streak at the end of the season and the team's rising talent and competency level. The Vols bring back 17 starters, including the core of a young defense that allowed just 15.5 points per game during their season-ending win streak. Quarterback is a bit of a question for Tennessee, though. Jarrett Garantano played well over the team's final 6 games, finding replacements for Marquez Callaway and Juwan Jennings at the receiver will be critical. So we're going to take our final break and continue our talk for the top 14 coming up after the break. This is the GSMC.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, and we're back, GSMC College Football Nation, and we are about to embark on the rest of the top 25. We got to 15 before the break, and now we're about to finish off with the top 14. Number 14 is the Cincinnati Bearcats. So the Bearcats cemented themselves as an AAC mainstay last season under Luke Finkel, producing an 11-win season for the 16 or for the second straight year. 14 starters are back from that team, including 8 off the defense that finished 31st nationally in yards allowed per play. The loss of star linebacker Brian Wright, who had 99 tackles and 14.5 tackles per loss, hurts, but there are several all-ACC caliber players on this unit, including defensive tackle Elijah Ponder, linebacker Jarrell White, and cornerback Ahmad Gardner. Finding an offensive pace setter in the question of star running back Michael Warren left for the NFL. Quarterback Desmond Ridder is back for his junior season, and his completion percentage needs to return to 2018 levels instead of what he produced a season ago, which was 55.1%. Don't be shocked if 4-star quarterback Evan Prater pushes his way into the conversation this fall, and he's the kind of talent who can raise Cincinnati's offensive ceiling. Number 13 is the UCF Knights. So UCF fatigue kicked in last year once the Knights' unbeaten streak came to an end against Pittsburgh. But this is still a team that won 10 games and finished second nationally behind LSU, averaging 540.5 yards per game. The quarterback who spearheaded the effort, Dylan Gabriel, should actually be better in 2020 entering his sophomore season. It certainly helps Gabriel that 7 starters return around him, including receivers Trey Nixon and Marlon Williams. A stat that may surprise you, the Knights built on explosive offenses finished 5th nationally in yards allowed per play. 8 starters off that stellar unit return, including standout defensive tackle Kenny Turner, and all-conference safety Antoine Collier. So, number 12 on the list is the North Carolina Tar Heels. So, this is a program that has the best chance to jump from fringe bowl team to divisional contender. Having freshman record setter Sam Howell is the biggest plus in North Carolina's favor. He's the type of passer who can elevate a program. The Tar Heels also bring back 17 starters, including 10 on offense. Another thing working for UNC, all 6 of his losses last season were by the possession or fewer. Those games won't go all against the Tar Heels next season. Mac Brown has jump-started this program quickly, and the ACC Coastal is, as always, there for the taking. Number 11 is the Auburn Tigers, so Auburn's sort of hard to rank. The team's strength from a season ago, the line of scrimmage, was ravaged by graduation. 4 offensive line starters depart along with key pieces Derek Brown, Marlon Davidson, Nick Coe, to the college football's best defensive line. You also have to wonder what you'll get from Bo Nix. The freshman should improve, but he still struggled against ranked competition last regular season. Plenty of talent remains, though. Seth Williams is a legitimate star at wide receiver, for instance. The Tigers have an exciting skill group and have recruited very well. But will the key pieces in the trenches be good enough to overcome a usually brutal schedule? And that's a tough question to answer at this point. Number 10, Oklahoma State Cowboys. So before Mike Gundy got the scalding water, nobody in college football had a better offseason than the Cowboys. Both All-American running back Chuba Hubbard, I always laugh at his name, Chuba Hubbard, and wide receiver Tylan Wallace made the shocking decision to skip the NFL draft to return to school, fortifying what already looked to be one of college football's most experienced rosters. Throw in a few likely starting transfers, offensive guard Josh Sills and cornerback Christian Holmes. The Oklahoma State has everything it needs to make a run at the college football playoff. Watch out for redshirt sophomore quarterback Spencer Sanders to emerge as one of the nation's better quarterbacks. The defense could be much improved in year 3 under Jim Knowles when you consider 10-year-end starters return. If there's any concerns here, is that the Cowboys have lost 2 likely offensive line starters this season due to either retirement or dismissals, and that's going to place a much more of an offensive success on the shoulders of Sanders. Number 9 is the Texas Longhorns. Texas returns a senior quarterback, Sam Ehlinger, who will be among the best in the country. The Longhorns bring back 7 starters around him, including potential All-American left tackle Samuel Cosme and running back room that will transform from injury-riddled weakness to strength, especially with the arrival of 5-star back Bijan Robinson. Defensively, the Longhorns can't get any worse after finishing 98th in yards allowed per play last season. They bring back 9 starters from a unit with plenty of talent and following an awful 2019 campaign, some experience to match. Could Tennessee implode? Yes. Tom Herman, with new coordinators on both sides of the ball, could end up with a scorching hot seat instead of a playoff hype, especially so given the constricted nature of the offseason, which have made scheme installation a challenge. But the ceiling of the Longhorns team is also extremely high. The Big 12 provides a somewhat favorable path, and Texas did shed a potential early season loss on its schedule against LSU. Number 8 is the Texas A&M Aggies. So the Aggies are going to be the most experienced returning teams in the country with 16 starters back, and in the second straight top 6 recruiting class, the Texas A&M has the framework to make a run in the SEC, especially when you consider quarterback Kellen Mond is back for his senior year. Is Mond elite? No, but he is an upper tier SEC quarterback who hopes to take the final step towards that elite distinction next season. The defense ranks 35th a season ago, returns 8 starters, and should employ one of the nation's top overall secondaries. Freshmen will play a big role in any rise from Texas A&M this year. Pass catchers Baylor Cupp, Desmond Demas, and others are going to help him really figure out how to become a better passer. And while defenders like Jalen Jones and McKinley Jackson can step in right away and contribute, so the schedule was previously Texas A&M's biggest boon and providing a rare, friendly path to the SEC West. That no longer is the case, with the Aggies adding cross-division games with Florida and Tennessee. Number 7 is LSU, so we understand LSU's 2019 run was magical. Once in a decade-like team rolled through the season led by historic offensive performances. Will the Tigers be a factor in 2020? Of course, and there's too much talent in Baton Rouge for them not to be. There will also be a drop-off. Logically, there has to be, as the Tigers will be without Heisman Trophy winner Joe Burrow, who's coming off the single greatest passing season in college football history. Miles Brennan, Burrow's successor, is confident stepping into that role, yet there will be inevitable recession. It's just a matter of how much. There's a talent in Baton Rouge, of course. LSU will be the wide receiver and cornerback. Well, they have the best wide receiver and quarterback in college football, along with a bevy of other elite prospects. But given LSU's schedule and the huge loss of quarterback again, Burrow was historically great, and it's hard to not project LSU to come back down a little bit, and it won't be much attention as the offense, but the defense's transition to a 4-3 under Bo Pelini is going to determine the team's ceiling. Number 6 is Notre Dame. So Notre Dame maintained some offensive continuity this offseason by promoting quarterback coach Tommy Rees. He has plenty to work with in year one. Senior quarterback Ian Brook leads the way, coming off a season in which he threw for 3,000 yards and ran for 500 yards more. Notre Dame needs the accuracy to get back into playoff-worthy 2018 level, and there's a strong skill cast behind him and some exciting impact freshmen, so Chris Tyree, Jordan Johnson, who can help right away. The offensive line will be a strength, as always, especially with Tommy Creamer and Robert Hainsey returning from injury. Defense is far more of a question mark with just 5 defensive starters returning, and you have to trust defensive coordinator Clark Lake, though he's put together back-to-back top 25 or top 15 defenses. Jeremy Osua-Cormier and Kyle Hamilton will give Lee 2-star defenders to shape the unit around. Notre Dame's foray into the ACC will be interesting. You could strongly argue that the schedule got easier for the Irish, but they have to play Clemson twice in order to reach the college football playoff, which is no easy task for anybody to handle. Number 5 is Oklahoma Sooners. So the Spencer Rattler era has come. The quarterback battle in Norman will likely be stretched out for over the sake of drama, but this is Rattler's job to lose. The top-rated passer in 2019 class should continue Oklahoma's torrid production at that spot. Honestly, he'll raise Oklahoma's ceiling against elite competition in some ways because he can do more as a passer than Jalen Hurts. The Sooners return all 5 offensive line starters, a boon for a unit that improved over the course of the 2019 campaign. For once, wide receiver is a question following the departure of CeeDee Lamb and the offseason injuries to sophomore Jadon Haselwood and the UCLA transfer Theo Howard. Oklahoma needs Charleston Rambo or Theo Wees to step up on the outside. Defensively, the Sooners seemed likely to step in year 2 under Alex Grinch, but things still stack against the unit. Losing star linebacker Kenneth Murray to the NFL was already a blow, and the season-ending injury to likely starter linebacker Caleb Kelly doesn't help either. Oklahoma will also have to contend with off-field issues for both of its standout edge rushers, Jonathan Perkins and Jalen Redmond. The Sooners will need to count on JUCO-heavy 2020 class and some less experienced defensive players early in the year. Still, these are your 5-time Big 12 champion Sooners. Oklahoma remains the favorite to win the 6th straight until proven otherwise. Number 4 is the Florida Gators. The large majority of Florida's offense returns, and that includes Kyle Trask, the quarterback, and a revelation of sorts taking over for Felipe Franks, a multiple players with starting experience along the offensive line. It helps that group will be boosted by elite tight end Kyle Pitts and a run game that will be just fine with Damon Pierce shouldering the load. The defense will be good like always if the Gators can replace the edge rushing pair of Jonathan Greenhard and Jabari Zunga. With total 21.5 tackles for loss last year, the outside rushers are so critical in defensive coordinator Todd Grafham's system. Fortunately for Florida, young players like Georgia transfer Brennan Cox and Zachary Carter look capable of filling those roles ably. Having Marco Wilson back to anchor the secondary is also huge, and sophomore K.R. Elm is a rising star on the opposite side. The schedule sets up well for Florida with LSU traveling to Gainesville, and if there was a year for Florida to catch Georgia in the SEC East, it would be this one amidst the pandemic. Number 3 is the Georgia Bulldogs. So Georgia's talent demands its land in the top 5 spot in these rankings, but there are a number of offensive questions to consider the Bulldogs barrel into the post-Jake Fromm era. Graduate transfer Jamie Newman was a good quarterback at Wake Forest. He brings an intriguing rush element that the offense will help the transition to a more spread-based attack. But I wouldn't necessarily describe him as a dominant player in the ACC from week to week. The battle between Newman and USC graduate JT Daniels is going to be fascinating. Whoever emerges as the quarterback will have a lot of youth around them. 3 of the Bulldogs' O-line starters depart, including a pair of first-round tackles, in addition to arguably the nation's best offensive line coach, Sam Pittman. The receiving core should be better, but George Pickens is still the only proven entity. The offense's transition under Todd Monken, especially as an offseason that lacked in-person interaction, is in question. On the other hand, the defense should be elite. 8 starters return off one of the best units in the country, including potential first-round DBs Eric Stokes and Richard LeCounte. Well, does this defense help Georgia overcome its schedule and potentially show offensive start? We'll see, but a likely early season game with Alabama will be very telling. Number 2, Alabama Crimson Tide. Alabama is the 3rd team with legit argument to be number 1, and the margin between 1 and 3 is thin. Obviously, the Crimson Tide lost All-American quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, and that hurts, but we saw late last season against Auburn and Michigan that Mac Jones is capable of throwing for 300 plus against top 10 defenses, and Jones still might lose his job to an incoming 5-star freshman in Bryce Young, and both quarterbacks have weapons. Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle will form one of the better 1-2 receiving combos in the country, and lead rusher Najee Harris is back for his senior season. 4 of the team's 5 offensive line starters return, which makes Alabama unique among legit title contenders. The Crimson Tide should be better defensively in 2020 simply because the team's biggest 2019 weakness is now a strength, with Dylan Moses and Joshua McMillan back in the fold for their senior years after missing the 2019 campaign with injuries. Throwing elite cornerback play with Patrick Surtain, and though the young secondary around him creates questions, the influx of potential special edge rushers like Will Anderson and the Tide should make a jump defensively to mitigate what they lost when Tua Tagovailoa exited. And number one, of course, is the Clemson Tigers. The Tigers have reached the playoff for 5 straight seasons, and they have playoff-worthy roster once again. It starts with their best quarterback prospect of a generation, Trevor Lawrence, and flows all the way to the Tigers' incoming number 3 overall recruiting class. Are there things to not like? Of course, but Clemson is losing 4 offensive line starters and one of the most impactful defenders in the country in Isaiah Simmons. A season-ending injury to star wide receiver Justin Ross doesn't help much either, but the Tigers will be far better along the defensive line. Tyler Davis, Xavier Thomas, Brian Brees, and several other elite talents is a scary combination. The depth should allow defensive coordinator Brian Venables to switch back to his preferred 4-down look up front after altering the scheme a season ago. It helps that Tigers All-American running back Travis Etienne opted to return for his senior season, providing Lawrence the needed safety valve both on the ground and through the air. Etienne is actually Clemson's leading returning rusher or receiver following Ross's injury, and the Tigers won't likely be better in 2020. The losses are significant, but they're still the safest playoff bet you can make entering the 2020 thanks to the path that the ACC presents. And that is your GSMC College Football podcast for today. Thank you all for sticking in and listening. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on whatever podcast platform you listen to. Don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook and Twitter at GSMC College Football. This has been Ethan, and we'll see you all next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.